tonight I just want to really tell you a story of our community, what happened. Rona's telling me all the things that are going on here, which are very impressive, but it might be interesting to hear our story and the things that happened and what things that surprised us. So the Ashton Hayes Carbon Neutral Project, it says our progress since 2006 there, but actually the idea for the project came in 2005. And my wife said to me, she said, "You're working too hard. I was running my own business. You need to take a week off. Let's go to Hay Festival, Literature Festival, and let's hear some books, read about books and hear some talks." So I went to the festival for the first time, and there was a talk organised by Greenpeace with the government chief scientist, Sir David King, and Shell, the chairman of Shell. And they were talking about climate change, which I'd never really thought about until then. And they discussed what the government was doing and the anxiety over climate change, and Shell was talking about what it would do with technology. And at the end of it, they got a standing ovation, which was amazing for a Greenpeace audience to give Shell a standing ovation, but they did. But right at the end, the two speakers said, "Listen, we've given you our talk for an hour about what we're doing, but what are you all going to do?" There's an audience of 2,000 people at Hay, and they said, "What are you all going to do as individuals, you know?" So I came away from that thinking, that's an interesting challenge, but what on earth do you do as an individual about climate change? It's such a big problem, and it's like beyond an individual's really to make an impact. Anyway, I thought about this for a while, and I noticed little news items coming out that Avis was trying to be a carbon neutral car company, rental company. And then I went walking with my wife on Shetland, and one day on Shetland, I don't know why it occurred to me there, but I thought, I wonder if we can persuade the village where we live to become carbon neutral. And that idea was where it germinated. So I came back, and that's when I decided, how do you do this? How do you actually motivate a community to do something? So Ashton Hayes is a village in rural Cheshire, Cheshire Plains, very sort of middle class conservative area. It's a small village, it's about 450 houses and 1,000 people. You'll see a few solar panels on roofs, but these weren't there 12 years ago. It's just a typical lovely community with a church and a school and a pub, almost like Ambridge really, I suppose. But that's what it's like. And my view was, if you cannot actually motivate people in such a nice community, how the hell do you do it in deprived areas of Liverpool or Manchester or London? How do you get people engaged? I'd lived there for about 20 years, and I'd never stood up in the community and done anything. I came back from this thinking about Hay Festival and walking on Shetland, and I said to my wife, let's go down to the pub. Let's go and meet our mates in the pub and see what they say. So we had a pub quiz on Wednesday nights, and I went down and I said, do you think you would find it completely crazy to try and become England's first carbon neutral village? Because I'd rung the government up and I said, could you tell me any villages that are trying to become carbon neutral? And they said, we don't know any, but if you want to do it, we'll help you, we'll give you some advice. So I went down to the pub, and my mates in the pub quiz team were saying, great, go for it, go for it, we'll support you. But I was particularly keen that we did it a certain way. I was very keen that it wasn't just a small pressure group, because I didn't think, if climate change is going to have an impact, it has to be everybody, not just small pressure groups. So I said, I won't do this unless we can try and engage the whole community. And the best way of doing that was to go to the Parish Council. This is the start of a film we made about Ashton Hayes. This is the first frame. 20th Century Fox never sued us, but it was quite good. So I went to the Parish Council, and I just wrote to them saying, I'm a citizen of the village, and I'd like to have 10 minutes as a citizen just to talk to the Parish Council. There were about 10 people in the meeting. And I explained over 10 minutes that I was concerned about climate change, and I felt Ashton Hayes was the kind of place we should give it a go. But I'd like it to be a Parish Council project, official project, and would they support it? And so they looked a bit bewildered, to be honest, about what all this was about. And they said, well, we're going to debate this now, you better leave the room, you see. So, and before I left the room, I did say, look, if you do this, I promise I'll never spend a penny of their parish precept on this project, which was one of the big fears, money. So there's no money going to be spent. So I went out of the room, and they voted, and I never knew what the vote was till about 5 years later. And it was 3-2 in favour of doing it. So it became a Parish Council project. And I came back in the room, and they said, look, we've voted to do this, but we want you to prove to us that the community will engage with this. It's only 10 of us in the room. You've got to prove to us that you can get people motivated. So we agreed within a month that we would have a public meeting to see what the public thought. But they also said to me, there's a few other conditions too, apart from not spending the money. The other condition is you take up the vacant seat on the Parish Council, which they've been wanting to fill for ages. So I volunteered to do that. And that was basically the two conditions. There was one other, I can't remember it now, but there was one other condition. Oh, we shared everything. The project, as a Parish Council project, was freely shared with anybody who wanted the information. We wouldn't keep it to ourselves. So I came out to the Parish Council meeting suddenly with a mandate to run a public meeting. And this is what we said we were going to try and do. This is the strategy of a few of us. We decided to do something about it because lots of people felt quite depressed about climate change, but they said, if we start to attempt something, we'll feel better psychologically. Our aim was to become the first community in England to achieve carbon neutral status, which is a massive aim, but we thought, well, why not go for it? And most people at that time said, we don't want to say to our grandchildren, we didn't do anything. That ours is a generation that needed to do something, and we had to do it. So, had to run a meeting. How do you get people there? The first thing was we needed some money, and the Parish Council wasn't going to give us any money. So I just got on the phone for 2 days to all the local businesses, and within 2 days I had cheques of £3,600 from local businesses, which really surprised us all. And what happened was everybody in business said, businesses are made of people, and our people are concerned about climate change, and we feel it's a good thing to do to support you, because our staff want to support you. But most of them said, we don't want to just give you money, we want to provide you with photocopying or exhibition stands, that sort of thing, skills, if you want anybody to a biologist or something. So it was really kind of really made me happy, all of us happy that we got this cheque. And the great thing was, because it was commercial money, there were no strings attached to it. So we didn't have to meet any rules. They said, spend it on what you like. But in return, we promised all these businesses photographs and a write-up for their annual reports or for the staff reports to show that they were doing something. So with that cash, we went and we had some signs made. On the left there is Professor Alexander, who's one of my pub quiz mates. He also runs the geography department at Chester University, and he was very keen on doing something about climate change. The thing that we noticed right from the start with this is a bottom-up project, and systems in Britain are not designed for bottom-up projects, they're designed for top-down projects. So we had the signs made and we needed to get them up. So one Sunday morning we sneaked out and we attached that sign to the village sign, and we had these other signs at the school as well. We knew we were kind of breaking the law because technically you're supposed to get permission, but we didn't have time. So we thought we'll just do it and see what happens. And for years Roy was worried about that photograph because he thought you'd get arrested for being there. But we also decided the school was an important place. The school really wanted to get involved with it, and the school children wanted to do something for this meeting. So we declared that on the 26th of January 2006 we'd have an evening meeting, and we press released it as well. So what was interesting is we got the media engaged. And my background is I'm an engineer, but I'm also a journalist. And I knew by calling the project aiming to be England's first carbon neutral village, the media wouldn't be able to resist the story because nobody else was claiming it at that time. But the problem with the media is they want to photograph things, and you can't photograph carbon dioxide or anything. So we got the children to do an exhibition of vehicles of the future as they saw it and put it up at the school. So this is the BBC Northwest team on the day before the meeting, and they came out to film the kids and talk about it. It was interesting because as soon as the TV arrived in the village with satellite trucks and things, everybody starts talking about it, and it goes around the village like wildfire. What on earth is going on, sort of thing. We'd already told people, but other people hadn't realised. The other thing about the children was we had as many children as we could get involved with this drawing project, because on the night all the kids are going to come and show it. But by doing that you drag all the parents and all the brothers and sisters and all the grandmas and grandpas, so you actually have an audience automatically, and they're very influential, the children, and they were great on television. And a nice spin-off was BBC Northwest then did some media training for the primary school children. The day after, they said we'll teach them how to speak on camera, which I thought was a lovely thing for the school. It was -2 on the Thursday night in January 2006, and we put like 50 seats out, and we got 400 people queuing to get in, which even now surprises me, even still today. And it was so cold, people were freezing outside, because we were trying to take a register of everybody who was coming. We said, oh, just come all in. And as part of the engagement, we said to people, if you come along, you get a free glass of English champagne, because the one thing that's improved with climate change is Chapel Down champagne from Kent. So we bought whole cases of that with the cash we got from businesses, because you wouldn't be able to allow to do that with a grant or anything. So we gave champagne, and the Women's Institute got involved by making apple pie for all the kids and everything. So we had this meeting, and this is half the audience, but we'd exceeded by then the health and safety limit for the school hall. So all the other parents and people in classrooms waiting for the second showing, which was kind of quite amazing. And you'll see on the right there, there's a laptop, and there's a guy with a microphone, and he turned up unannounced, and he was from the BBC World Service. He'd heard about it, and he broadcast it to 12 million people from the and we didn't know he was doing this. So that was interesting. The other thing about this was quite interesting. We'd gone on the media the day before, and on the afternoon of the event, I got a phone call from the local MP for Chester, who was actually in the cabinet, and he rang me up and he said, I'm coming to open your meeting tonight. And I said, why? And he said, because I am your local MP and it's my duty to open this meeting. He'd seen it was going to get some publicity. And I said, no, you're not. I said, you're not opening it. Well, he was furious with me. And I think had I not been a journalist and used to these kind of people, he would have frightened me to death. And I said, you're not coming, but you can come and sit in the audience and listen. You can learn. And he got really grumpy. He said, well, I'll come and sit in the audience anyway. So on the night, he turns up, but he also turns up with the most gigantic satellite truck from Granada Television. And what he hadn't told me is that he'd arranged to be on a panel on telly on a programme at 9 o'clock, where he was talking from the school to talk about climate change with the school. So we never allowed him to stand up. And at the end, he tried to stand up and talk, but everybody just ignored him. But the point was, from that moment onwards, we then said, in the entire life of this project, we're not going to allow politicians to address us, because it divides the community. If you start having Greens, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems, you don't want to have politicians addressing you. And our view was as well that they're so short term in terms of 4 years that they can't really look at the long term that we were trying to look at as a village. And that's been a brilliant thing to do, by the way, because it makes politicians desperate to talk to you. Because they're told they can't, so they really try. And the journalists loved it as well, because they thought it was something quite cute. The other thing we agreed was our overriding aim in life was to live harmoniously as a village, and that this project had the potential to split people up. If you had people who didn't believe in climate change or didn't want to get engaged, we didn't want to have arguments. So we said, anybody involved in the project, we do not argue with anyone. So if somebody down the street says this is ridiculous, you say, okay, fine, if you ever want to talk about it, we're there. But we didn't stand up and do an argument. We went round them and talked to somebody else. We all showed learning freely, as I said. We also said it had to be fun. So at that meeting with the school, we got people to sign up saying, are you interested in helping? And from then on, every meeting we had about every month was in someone's house, different houses where people like to go, and we always had wine and cheese and drinks, and we made it a fun evening, not just a serious evening. And I thought that was important too, because people who are, you notice people sit on the outside looking in, do I want to get involved in this? And then suddenly they hear about the party going on because of the carbon neutral project. They're like, oh, I'll go to that, it sounds like a good night. So these are little things, but they're subtle. So what we told them at the first meeting was, there's no point doing this unless we measure our impact. We don't want to just say we're trying. So the University of Chester agreed that in 2006, for 5 years, that they put 5 or 6 students in the village for 6 weeks who went round house to house with a form asking people their lifestyle, which involved not just how they ran the house, but the travel, the holidays, where they went for work, that sort of thing. And By doing that, because they were all branded as University of Chester, a lot of people like that. Some of the people living on their own loved to having a few students in the lounge having a cup of tea, and all the students said they'd seen nearly everybody's photo album, going around the village. But also they have this conversation about why we're doing it, its explanation. And so that was really, really useful. This is a form. Now you can't read that, but I can supply them. Fundamentally, we asked about the energy bills, meter readings, but where you went for holidays, would you have double glazing, do you have insulation in your loft and stuff. And at the end of it, they analysed it, and everybody got back the feedback form about 2 months later. And this form was specifically for everybody's house, not the general form. So if someone had put double glazing in, we didn't suggest they put double glazing in, so it was tailored. And people put this on the fridge with a fridge magnet. And it went down from top to bottom with the sort of lowest hanging fruit to the toughest things to do. And all the top stuff was behaviour change or maybe light bulbs. And people started to follow their own journey. But some people went even further and declared they're never going to use the washer dryer again. And they're not going to get on the plane again. And it was amazing to see people's reaction. Then other people came out with genius ideas as well. But it was very specifically that it wasn't just a general thing, it was for your house, this is what we've analysed. Interesting things that turned up, but what we discovered is if you want to influence somebody, it doesn't really work when the council sends you a letter or a note. What works is your neighbour saying, have you tried this? My boiler's really saved me loads of money. Now Richard on the bottom right here, he was an electrician by background, and he decided he would start to work out the cost in energy and price of running different machinery. This was off his own bat, and he arrived with this matrix of information, and people started to see he was doing that. But Richard didn't have a DVD player and things like that, so people were taking the DVD players around to Richard's house, and he was using them while he charged it. So he produced this, and he calculated his footprint at 5.2, which is really low, 5.2 grams, tons of carbon a year. If you get somebody who's got a particular interest who'll do something and they're a neighbour, people tend to trust them, and people will always trust a neighbour. So we had a policy of if somebody had done something interesting, go around to the house and have a look at it, and we introduce them to one another, which I think you're doing here. But it was a fascinating thing to do. And then we got the scouts involved, and the scouts took home these devices that measured the cost of making a cup of tea or something like that. And they went home and did that, and they were really delighted that their PlayStations cost like 1/7 of what it makes to run a cup of tea. So then we had other kids going home switching off lights, and we had a few emails saying the grandma's been left in the dark, and but it's caused a laugh. We wanted to try and be a carbon neutral community, but we wanted to tell other people what it's like. But we had no money at all. We just had no budget, we couldn't advertise. But what we did have was a story. And over the first couple of years, it seemed to really catch people's attention. And so for the first year, we had probably at least 1 or 2 film crews a week in the village, which was hard work to manage, frankly. But it was this strange story going on in England. Then we had visitors from Australia and New Zealand and Canada coming to talk to us. The reason we supported it was because we wanted the message to get out about climate change. It wasn't trying to publicise Ashton, it wasn't trying to show off. It was about let's get a dialogue going. And I think that was important. But the other thing we did was we asked people, would they mind telling their stories to the television crews or to the newspapers? So we made a list of families who'd been doing things, like the woman who'd stopped using a washer dryer and things like that. And we had a checklist, and every time a film crew came, we said, you can only speak to this family, they're the next on the list. So every family got coverage, and we had one woman who got a full page in The Guardian about what she was doing, and so it was really good. And it made people proud because they see the coverage. It made people proud of what we were doing, and that was very important. And it made the government sit up. That's the other thing. It made the council sit up. Blimey, this is getting on the front page of the newspapers, and where Chester is supposed to be doing something, there's no stories coming out of Chester. So it was good for us. One of the other interesting things that was quite fun is when we got the money from the businesses, I said to one business leader, I said, what would be the best thing we could do for you with this project? And he said, get me in the Financial Times, he said. For 100 quid he'd given us, he wanted to be in the Financial Times. So when the Financial Times came to do it, they did a 5-page story in their magazine on Ashton Hayes, and I took them round and he was interviewed in the Financial Times. And it was really sweet that he got his wish. And his dad was really proud of him as well, so this was good. Okay, so as the publicity went on, there was a concert called the Live Earth Rock Concert in 2007 at Wembley. And it was the first day the new Wembley was open. And they had rock bands from all over the world, Pussycat Dolls, Doctor Who and people like that on the stage. And it was coordinated around the world with Australia and Los Angeles. And we got a call from the BBC saying, could you represent Britain at a Live Earth Rock concert? And we said, so Barry from the pub, Barry, by the way, who ran the pub, Republican, he was a total sceptic about the project. He thought it was ridiculous. And one day before this, he'd said, I'm sceptical about your project, but my bill is killing me, my energy bill. Can you help me? So we said, we went in, and the university went in. And in a day, we changed his processes. He was switching on his ovens at 9 in the morning to cook the first meal at lunchtime. It was ridiculous. He had all these beer barrels being cooled in winter in the cellar, all sorts of stupid things. And we made a list, and in the first month he saved £200 off a £1,000 a month bill. And he was totally converted with this project. So when we were asked to go to this Live Earth thing, I said to Barry, do you want to come with me? So he came, and this is an interview we had that day. He was surrounded by everybody you can imagine, and he said it was like a wonderful day. Going back to Ashton Hayes, one of the things we realised with the project, you can't leave it 9 months before you do something. You have to get the project bubbling along. And one of the things the council said to us, Cheshire County Council in those days, said, what can we do to help? And we said, well, if you really want to help, build us a footpath to the next door's village where there's a railway station, because that footpath, you cannot walk on the road, it wasn't there before, and you could get killed if you walked on the road. And they said, oh no, we can't do that because there's no record of any fatalities on that road on the way, so we can't justify building this footpath. So we said, okay, but that's what you asked us, well, you know. We get out of our cars then. So about 3 or 4 days later, Sky Television rang up and said, we'd like to come and do an interview. I said, would you like to interview the Cheshire County Council about what they're doing? And they said, yeah, well, why not? I said, well, go and ask them about our footpath. So, and before they got the interview, they passed a bill through the council. They financed the only carbon neutral finance footpath in Britain, and they put 75,000 quid towards it just in a week, which was like, and people said the project was worthwhile just to get the footpath, never mind about the climate change. It was like something we'd tried for years, so you just don't know. But the media was really powerful in convincing every time we did something, the council sat up because they were worried about, well, they were also worried they liked it, but they were just a bit worried about the publicity. And now that's really well used a lot too. Okay, so then the other thing was we got a phone call from the House of Commons, and they were doing one of these where they interview the public and give evidence to the House of Commons, which goes in the document called Hansard. And we were invited, this was at University of East Anglia actually, but it was officially the Houses of Parliament for a day, and they have all the guards there and everything. And we gave evidence which has gone down as community energy evidence, which was fascinating to do with a few people from the village. Just talked about the students, we kept on doing the surveys, we did a lot of similar houses, 170 houses about per year. The problem you have is people come and go, so you don't get a continuity record because people have left that house and some more people have come in. But it was very fascinating, the students loved it, and by the way, we'd had 3/4 of all the households involved in this survey. By this time we'd started winning some grants, and we started off with all that kind of the grants there. The biggest grant was under the Low Carbon Communities project from DEC, and there was £10 million to be shared out by the government over 20 communities, and 295 communities entered it, but only 20 got the award. And we got 400,000 from DEC to do a microgrid, so that was brilliant. And then just as we were told we got the money, there was an election in 2010, and the Conservatives won the election and announced a moratorium on spending. So they said, okay, we know you've got this money, but we're going to have a look at whether we want to spend it, and we'll tell you in September sometime whether you've got it. So we hung around until September, and then they said, yeah, you've got it, you've got your £400,000. And we said, but can we then have a year to do this? Because they'd taken 6 months off our year. And they said, no, you've got to spend it all in the financial year. And we said, well, we can't build a microgrid in that time, because it involved the school. They said, well, but we could build a sports pavilion with some solar panels on the roof because we really wanted a sports pavilion. They said, that'll do. Okay, do that then. So we got this sports pavilion. And we got the designs and everything agreed with the village by like December, and we had to build it and spend this money by February, end of February, beginning of March, and we still hadn't got planning permission for this. We hadn't even applied for planning permission. So we said, oh, sod it, we're just going to build it. So we applied for planning permission and built it without planning permission though. And we told the council, please tell us to knock it down because it's the best story we're going to have about climate change. So we did, it's again this bottom-up thing. We couldn't rush anything, but we had nearly £500,000 to spend and we wanted to spend it. Another small spin-off, that young guy there in the middle holding the award, he was a budding filmmaker and he wanted to help. And he said, I'll make some films. He made 5 films, but the first film he made covered the first year of the project and interviewing lots of people. And we submitted it for an award called the Clarion Award, which is a big film award every year, and it was for the climate change for the whole of Europe. And we just submitted it, and we got a call saying, would you come down to the South Bank studios because you've been shortlisted. Your film's been shortlisted. So we got a minibus and went down, and we sat in the audience with the BBC and Procter & Gamble and all these companies, always these amazing high definition films. And our film came on, which was really grainy because it was blown up into a massive screen, and we won the first prize. And they said it's because it was a very honest film the guy made, and he's gone on to make films now. So it's like these little things get people's genius, get them engaged with something they want to do, and the project actually helped him and a few other people as well. And we won quite a few awards and different bits of money. So what's actually happening? Well, in 5 years we saved 20% and maintained it for 5 years. We saved 20% in the first year. It's really easy to save 20%. And people say that's not much, but it's a lot. You know, it's more than our nuclear generation for the country in terms of overall generation. Flights came down a lot. Home energy came down 21%, but people didn't really get out of the cars because we noticed there's things that don't change. People don't buy a car and change it. And people live in a village where there's no transport except the railway, and they didn't get out of the cars. So we realised that people said to us, it's getting tough. We've tried for 5 years and we're only about 20 to 25%. So we formed an energy company. We built that pavilion with the money from DEC and covered it in solar panels. Although we paid for that pavilion, we donated it to the field, and now we rent the space off our building, and the rent for those solar panels pays for the entire maintenance of the field. The revenue they get pays for all the football field maintenance. We had an electric car, and the school has got a roof full of solar panels which we own, and which makes the school carbon negative for 6 months a year. They export energy 6 months a year. The car didn't work as well. I can explain why. We couldn't get people to sign up for the electric Nissan Leaf. People said it was like Starship Enterprise trying to drive it, and they just didn't want to engage with it. So it's a pity because we had a community electric car. The energy company now earns quite a lot of money. We've put more solar panels on the school for free. That's really saved about £30,000 a year of the school's bills. And we're now getting more and more money, and we're about to fund other projects in the village. We had these other things spin off since as well. The confidence in the carbon neutral project, people said, led us to buying the village shop, and it now runs, it's an award-winning village shop. We now have a community cafe in the pavilion, which is really great for people, particularly older people who live on their own. And the recreation facility won the Queen Elizabeth Award for the best recreation ground in Britain. And it's this sort of working together that we've developed over the last few years in Ashton, where the sustainability community action works together. Little side stories, these are people from abroad, from Norway. We were invited to Norway to help them start projects near Oslo. Top right there is a guy called Charles Simon from Eden Mills in Canada. And they went back with all our branding, and there's an identical project in Eden Mills in Canada, been going for 12 years now, and they've saved more energy than we have, and it's been very famous on Canadian television. And on the left there is a woman journalist who came from the New York Times, and we said, well, there's no point coming all the way from New York. She said, no, I want to come. So she came from New York. She brought 2 National Geographic photographers with her, spent 3 days in the village interviewing people, and at the end of it, my daughter-in-law, who's American, said there's something strange about that woman, and she started Googling her, and her name's Tatiana Schlossberg, and she's John F. Kennedy's granddaughter. And people in the village were sort of kind of thrilled that they'd had this experience of being with her granddaughter. Some funny stories about that, about her being with us. People say they now use the community shop more. People think about the personal impact, which is what Roy said. 98% of people, when they're asked now, say they're proud of the village, which we're very pleased about that. And more recently, we've been starting to do some work with the teenagers who've left the village and gone off to other parts of their lives, about how did it influence their lives. And there's a big study going on about the people who left, who grew up to at the age of 30, being interviewed by University of Chester about what have they gone on to do. And it's quite interesting seeing what they went on to do. So what do we learn? If you want to raise awareness of climate change, engage the media and have meetings and events. Being inclusive. Don't ask people to do something they don't want to do. If they're really keen on doing something, say give it a go. And the only rule we had was, if you give something a go, you've got to tell us whether it works or not, and we'll publish that. Measure. We think measurement's really important. And recognise that things go wrong. And also collaborate with everybody. Don't ignore anybody, because we felt we're all human beings together in this, and we have to influence everyone. So local businesses and everybody we influenced. And influencing the influencers, so that what's interesting, certain people on the project couldn't access other groups. So Barry the publican was really friendly with the football team, and he persuaded the football team to start car sharing. And they started car sharing to matches. And we also got we had 2-minute showers in the pavilion to get people used to hot water and things, which was funny. But the football team then got interviewed in the national press, and they were really delighted to say, oh, we're car sharing. And the final thing is having a lot of fun, which is really important. To keep people motivated for 13 years, it has to be fun. So that's a snapshot. One of the things that we're very proud of is about 2 years ago we did the neighbourhood plan, which took a long time. And the core of the neighbourhood plan is that the carbon neutrality is the core of the Ashton Hayes neighbourhood plan. And that's been signed off, and it's now with the council planners, and they accept that renewable energy is the main thing. 93% voted for the carbon neutrality in the neighbourhood plan. And we feel that's a sort of legacy of the project for generations. And then the next thing now is we're trying to buy the community pub, and that's going to be a carbon hub, and we're in the middle of trying to do that. And that's it really, just a quick snapshot, but happy to answer any questions you have or discuss anything you'd like to do.